Impossible. 4 identical little girls on the freezing street corner, swallowed by worn coats, selling hope in $5 bouquets. Then one looked up. Harrison Blackwood. Froze. The world falling silent. Olivia Martell's face, impossibly young, etched with a resilience that echoed hers, stared back at him. 10 years. 10 years since he'd cast her out, believing the doctors, believing the lies that shattered their world. And those eyes, impossibly terrifyingly, his own Blackwood blue, reflected in 4 identical pairs. His voice was a strangled whisper, torn from a place deep inside him he hadn't known existed. "Who are you?" The girl named Clara blinked, pulling back slightly, her small brow furrowed. "We're the Flower Girls," she answered simply before tugging her sisters urgently. "We have to go now. Margaret will worry." And just like that, they vanished into the bustling crowd, leaving Harrison utterly shattered, grasping at ghosts on a Fifth Avenue sidewalk, the impossible truth crashing down around him. The bespoke tailoring of Harrison Blackwood's suit felt less like a symbol of success, and more like expensive armor against a world he commanded, yet rarely touched. Inside the climate-controlled sanctuary of his sedan, idling at a Fifth Avenue red light, the city's chaotic energy was a muted spectacle behind tinted glass. Another deal closed. Another billion added to the Blackwood empire. An empire built on shrewd decisions, relentless drive, and a carefully guarded heart. He loosened his tie, a rare crack in the perfect facade. Success tasted like nothing much lately, just the metallic tang of solitude. He remembered his father's final words, not about profits or power, but a warning whispered on a mahogany-paneled deathbed, about trust, about vipers, hiding behind familiar smiles, about protecting the Blackwood legacy from dilutions of the heart. A lesson Harrison had learned perhaps too well, carving canyons of caution around his own life. Mr. Blackwood Thomas, his driver, broke the silence, his eyes meeting Harrison's in the rearview mirror. "Continue back to headquarters." Harrison glanced at the sterile perfection of the towers piercing the November sky. Suddenly the thought of returning to the hushed reverence of his office felt suffocating. "No, Thomas. Drop me here. I need air." Stepping onto the bustling sidewalk, the crisp bite of impending winter was a welcome shock. He adjusted the collar of his coat, a man accustomed to controlling environments, now adrift in the city's unpredictable flow. Doormen tipped their hats, sensing the aura of power that clung to him like expensive cologne. Harrison Blackwood at 52 was the undisputed king of his concrete kingdom, his silver-threaded dark hair and piercing blue eyes, the infamous Blackwood blue, echoing generations of dominance. Yet beneath the surface, a profound emptiness gnawed a hollowness that 10 years of relentless work had failed to fill. 10 years since. Aha, the crosswalk signal chirped. Harrison moved with the anonymous crowd, his mind already calculating third-quarter projections. And then he stopped, frozen. There huddled on the street corner, arranging small, hopeful bouquets of carnations in plastic buckets, were 4 little girls. 4 small figures, swallowed by mismatched second-hand coats, their fingers reddened by the cold, peeking through worn, fingerless gloves. A piece of cardboard leaned against a bucket, the words, "Flowers for Hope." 5 saludos, drawn in a careful, childish hand. He would have walked past. He always walked past. Street vendors were part of the city's static, easily ignored. But something snagged his attention, a defiant tilt to their chins, a shared resilience in their small shoulders. And then, one of them looked up. The noise of Manhattan vanished. Honking taxis, chattering pedestrians, the subterranean rumble of the subway, all silenced, because the eyes looking back at him, curious and startlingly blue, were his. Blackwood blue, staring out from a face that couldn't be older than 9, maybe 10. A face that was heart-stoppingly, impossibly familiar. It was Olivia's face. Olivia Martell, the woman he had loved with a terrifying intensity, the woman whose memory was a scar tissue he never touched, the woman he had cast out a decade ago. Not just one face, 4 identical faces, quadruplets. His breath hitched. The girl who'd caught his eye nudged her sister, whispering. Soon all 4 were looking at him, their identical blue eyes wide with childish curiosity. His eyes. A sharp ringing startled him. His phone. He fumbled, dropping his sleek briefcase onto the grimy sidewalk with a clatter. Mr. Blackwood. Sarah, his assistant, her voice tinny and distant. The board meeting. I'll call you back, he stammered, ending the call without taking his eyes off the girls. One of them, the first one, stepped forward, hesitantly, holding out a small, slightly lopsided bouquet. Would you like to buy some flowers, sir? Her voice. Clear, melodic, achingly familiar, yet impossibly high-pitched. It shattered something deep inside him, a dam holding back 10 years of buried grief and regret. Who are you? The question escaped his lips, a raw whisper, lost in the city din. The little girl blinked, confused, pulling the flowers back slightly. I'm Clara, she said, her tone surprisingly steady. And these are my sisters, Flora, Alice, and Maya. She pointed to each in turn. Flora offered a shy glance. Alice's gaze remained wary assessing, while Maya gave a tiny, hopeful smile that revealed a missing front tooth. We're the flower girls. Clara, Flora, Alice, Maya. Names he'd never heard yet. They resonated with a seismic shock. A nearby car horn blared, breaking the spell. The smallest one, Maya, tugged urgently at Clara's sleeve. We have to go, Clara said, her brief moment of interaction ending abruptly. Margaret will worry. Before Harrison could utter another word, they were a whirlwind of practiced efficiency, packing worn buckets, gathering unsold flowers. In seconds, they melted back into the indifferent river of pedestrians, leaving Harrison Blackwood, standing alone on the sidewalk, his forgotten briefcase at his feet, the ghost of 4 identical faces seared into his mind. 10 years. 10 years since he'd stood in his penthouse cold fury, icing his veins, listening to Olivia's tearful pleas. 10 years since she'd insisted the pregnancies, impossibly, were a miracle their miracle. 10 years since he armed with Dr. Cole's definitive damning diagnosis of sterility, and fueled by Genevieve's subtle poisons about fortune hunters and protecting the family name, had refused to believe. 10 years since he'd chosen the sterile legacy of Blackwood over the messy, unbelievable miracle of life she offered. His hand trembled as he retrieved his briefcase. The board meeting, the acquisitions, the empire, ash and dust. None of it mattered. He pulled out his phone again, fingers punching a familiar number with new, desperate urgency. Davies Harrison's voice was tight, strained. I need you to find someone. 4 girls. Identical quadruplets around 9 years old. Selling flowers near 5th and 53rd. He paused the next words, tasting like rust and regret. And, locate Olivia Martell, my ex-wife. He needed answers, even if those answers tore down everything he thought he knew about the last decade of his hollow, gilded life. He had to know. The taxi deposited Harrison Blackwood, or rather the awkwardly conceived Harry Porter, 2 blocks away from Harbour of Hope. He'd traded his bespoke suit for unremarkable jeans and a worn sweater that felt foreign against his skin, a billionaire playing dress-up in the uniform of anonymity. The shelter building stood before him, a testament to endurance rather than elegance, peeling paint windows patched with tape, yet an undeniable air of sanctuary clung to it, a stark contrast to the cold, imposing grandeur of his own world. He pushed open the door, the scent of disinfectant and simmering soup replacing the sterile air of his office. The common area was sparsely furnished, but clean, filled with the low murmur of women's voices and the occasional shriek of children's play. For a moment, Harrison felt profoundly out of place, an intruder in a world built on resilience he couldn't comprehend. A woman with kind eyes, framed by laugh lines and a cascade of practical grey hair, approached him, wiping her hands on an apron. "You must be Harry Porter," she said, her voice warm but her gaze shrewd. "I'm Margaret Finch. Welcome to Harbour of Hope." "Thank you for having me," Miss Finch Harrison replied, forcing a smile that felt stiff. "As I mentioned on the phone, recently retired from tech. Looking to lend a hand while I figure out my next chapter." Margaret nodded slowly, her eyes lingering perhaps a fraction too long on his face, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths, before she ushered him towards the kitchen. "Well, Mr. Porter, we can always use an extra pair of hands, especially male hands. Most of our children, they haven't had many positive male figures in their lives." His first assignment was peeling potatoes for the evening meal. Harrison Blackwood, who hadn't peeled a vegetable since his university days decades ago, found himself staring down a mountain of spuds and a menacingly simple peeler. 20 minutes later, the pile seemed barely diminished, while a small mound of mangled potato flesh and peelings surrounded his station. Margaret walked past, pausing to observe his handiwork. A small smile touched her lips. "Well, Mr. Porter," she said, her tone dry as toast, "I see your talents might lie elsewhere. Perhaps you're better at filing." Harrison felt a flush creep up his neck, unused to such gentle mockery, or indeed to failing at anything. Perhaps he conceded, grateful for the out. Over the next few days, Harry Porter became a quiet fixture at the shelter. He helped serve meals, attempted minor repairs with tools that felt alien in his grasp, and mostly he watched. He watched them. Clara, Flora, Alice, and Maya moved through the shelter like a cohesive unit, their bond palpable. Clara, the eldest, by minutes, directed her sisters with quiet authority, organizing their shared belongings in the small space allocated to them, her brow often furrowed with a seriousness that didn't belong on a 9-year-old's face. Once she approached Harrison while he was attempting to sort donated books. "Mr. Porter," she stated gravely, handing him a box of crayons. "These require immediate chromatic categorization. A vital task." Harrison, baffled, but unwilling to break character, spent the next hour arranging crayons by precise shade under her watchful eye. Flora, the artist, was often found sketching in a worn notebook, her silence intense. She occasionally offered Harrison a glimpse of her work. Surprisingly detailed drawings of flowers, faces sometimes just patterns of light and shadow. She tried to teach him how to draw a simple daisy once. His lopsided, uneven attempt earned him a patient sigh and a softly murmured, "Maybe try again tomorrow, Mr. Porter." Maya, the smallest, was the most open sometimes, offering him a shy smile or asking simple questions about the outside world. But it was Alice who remained the most resistant. She rarely spoke directly to him. Her blue eyes, his blue eyes, narrowed with suspicion whenever he drew near. Her small body often positioned itself protectively between Harrison and her sisters, a miniature guardian, fierce in her loyalty. He saw her glare when he helped Maya tie her shoe, saw her pull Flora back slightly when he offered her a compliment on her drawing. Her distrust was a constant, uncomfortable reminder of the chasm his past actions had created. One afternoon, while helping Margaret sort donations, Harrison steered the conversation carefully. "The quadruplets, they seem remarkable," he began, trying to sound casually interested. Margaret's expression softened. "They are extraordinary. Their mother, Olivia, she's one of the strongest women I've ever known." She paused, her gaze drifting towards the window. Life hasn't been kind to her, especially these last few years. Harrison held his breath. "What happened?" Margaret sighed, turning back to him, her earlier shrewdness replaced by a weary sadness. Olivia worked tirelessly. 3 jobs sometimes, cleaning offices at night, waitressing on weekends, anything to keep a roof over their heads after her circumstances changed drastically about 10 years ago. Harrison flinched inwardly at the oblique reference. She had just started getting back on her feet, retraining as a florist. She has a real gift for it, taught the girls everything they know, when the pandemic hit. Lost everything. Overnight. She shook her head, her voice lowering. Evicted. No family nearby to turn to. She came here with the girls utterly broken, but determined. They started the flower selling. It was their lifeline. Margaret's eyes hardened. Then 4 months ago, she was arrested. Shoplifting. Shoplifting, Harrison echoed, feeling a cold dread seep into his bones. "Not diamonds," Mr. Porter, Margaret said sharply, perhaps sensing his shock felt different from mere sympathy. "Bread. Milk. Peanut butter. Baby formula for another resident's infant she was helping with. Essentials. Less than $70 worth." She leaned forward slightly. First offense. Yet Judge Marcus Thorne. He threw the book at her. 6 months. Rikers Island. Made an example of her, he said. 6 months for trying to feed her children. The casual cruelty of it, the stark injustice, hit Harrison with physical force. Olivia. His Olivia imprisoned for stealing baby formula while he navigated billion-dollar deals. He felt sick. And the father. He forced himself to ask the words, thick in his throat. Margaret's lips thinned. Olivia rarely speaks of him. Only that he was wealthy, that he denied the children were his because of some medical diagnosis. Said he couldn't accept he was wrong. She looked directly at Harrison, now her gaze piercing. Funny thing is the girls. They have his eyes. That distinctive blue. Harrison felt stripped bare, his disguise suddenly flimsy. He quickly looked away, pretending to organize a stack of blankets. Later that week, he saw it himself. He was helping serve dinner when he noticed the girls huddled together in a corner afterwards, Clara holding a small handful of crumpled bills and coins. Flora pulled out a small notebook, and Clara dictated figures, while Flora carefully wrote them down. $7.50 from the carnations, $5 from the daisies. Need $3.25 more for Mum's commissary this week. Clara murmured, her small face tight with concentration. Alice stood beside her, scanning the common room, as if guarding their meager treasure, while Maya traced patterns on the table, looking worried. The sight of his 9-year-old daughters meticulously budgeting pennies for their imprisoned mother, while he lived in obscene luxury, sent a wave of nausea and profound shame through him. This wasn't just misfortune. This was a direct consequence of his actions, his pride, his willful ignorance, amplified by Genevieve's insidious whispers, and a system that punished poverty with callous severity. He had been observing, analyzing, calculating his next move like a corporate strategist. But watching his children count pennies for prison commissary wasn't strategy. It was a reckoning. He was refilling water pitchers later lost in the turmoil of his thoughts, when a small figure blocked his path. It was Alice. She stood with her hands on her hips, her small chin tilted up defiantly, those unnervingly familiar blue eyes fixed on his face. "Why do you keep looking at us like that?" she demanded, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the noise of the common room and the turmoil in his own head. Harrison froze, the plastic pitcher suddenly heavy in his hand. Alice tilted her head, her gaze unflinching. Like you've lost something. Her words, so simple, so direct, struck him with the force of a physical blow. Lost, he hadn't just lost something. He had thrown it away, 10 years ago. And now, staring into the fierce, knowing eyes of his daughter, Harrison Blackwood knew his time hiding in the shadows disguised as Harry Porter was over. Observation wasn't enough. Understanding wasn't enough. He had to act. He had to reclaim what he had abandoned. Harrison Blackwood moved with the calculated speed of a man deploying capital. Only now the currency was truth, and the investment was his soul. The polished chrome and glass expanse of Catherine Sterling's law firm occupied half a floor overlooking Central Park, a world away from Harbour of Hope's worn linoleum. Catherine, sharp and impeccably dressed, listened intently as Harrison laid out the situation, omitting only his personal connection, for now. 6 months for shoplifting $70 worth of groceries, first offence, sole custody of 4 dependents. Catherine tapped a manicured nail on the file. Even for Judge Marcus Thorne, who has a reputation for punitive sentencing, particularly during the pandemic fallout, this smells off. Badly off. Explore every angle, Ms. Sterling Harrison, said his voice, tight. Discreetly, but quickly. Money is no object. Understood, Mr. Blackwood. Her eyes held his. We'll start with the court transcripts and any filings related to sentence appeals. Something tells me this file is heavier than it looks. Next stop, Dr. Alistair Cole's EMR fertility clinic. The air hung thick with antiseptic and unspoken anxieties. Dr. Cole, thinner and greyer than Harrison remembered, practically vibrated with nervousness upon seeing him stride into his private office unannounced. Mr. Blackwood. This is unexpected, Cole stammered, adjusting his glasses. Harrison remained standing, letting his height and cold fury fill the room. 10 years ago, Dr. Yu diagnosed me as sterile. Effectively 0 probability, I believe were your words. Cole swallowed, fiddling with a pen. Well, medicine. Mr. Blackwood, it's not always an exact science. Statistical anomalies can... 4 statistical anomalies, Harrison cut him off, his voice dangerously soft. Identical quadruplets, doctor. Born 9 months after you assured me conception was impossible. Explain that particular inexactitude. The doctor's face went putty grey. Quadruplets. Astonishing. As I recall, your particular profile indicated severe oligoasthenoteratozoospermia. The parameters were extremely low. Low doctor or non-existent Harrison leaned forward. Because my ex-wife was carrying my 4 children when I threw her out, based on your definitive diagnosis. I merely conveyed the statistical likelihood, the extreme unlikelihood. Cole was sweating now, his professional jargon a flimsy shield. Your sister, Ms. Genevieve Dubois, she consulted with me after your tests, expressed concern about the strain on your marriage, the cruelty of offering false hope given the infinitesimal odds. Harrison felt a glacial cold spread through his veins. My sister instructed you to lie about my results. Not suggest, merely suggest a more definitive prognosis would be kinder in the long run, less ambiguous given the marital friction she alluded to. Cole's voice trailed off under Harrison's unblinking stare. She was very concerned about protecting the Blackwood name from complications. Complications. Harrison repeated the word, tasting like poison. 4 daughters raised in poverty, while their father lived in ignorant luxury. Those kinds of complications. He turned sharply, leaving the crumbling doctor behind. He had the confirmation he needed. Genevieve hadn't just reinforced his doubts. She had actively engineered the foundation of his catastrophic mistake, preying on the trust issues Harrison already harbored. Back in the sterile quiet of his car, Harrison listened grimly as Davies delivered his report over the encrypted line. Davies's voice, as always, was utterly devoid of emotion, which somehow made the information even more chilling. So confirmation of mail interception is positive. Redirects were established from Ms. Martel's known addresses, post-separation, to a P.O. box linked to a shell corporation funded by Ms. Dubois. Numerous letters, including certified mail, were returned, unopened or lost. We've recovered digital copies of several letters Ms. Martel sent to her own attorney documenting these attempts. Pause. Furthermore, analysis confirms substantial contributions from entities linked to Ms. Dubois to foundations and political action committees associated with Judge Marcus Thorne preceding and following Ms. Martel's sentencing. Communications intercepted from Ms. Dubois' office reference ensuring the Bennett woman serves her full term and preventing further embarrassment. Davies continued, his tone unchanging. Additionally, Sir Ms. Dubois, through an intermediary, has initiated contact with Child Protective Services. They are citing anonymous complaints regarding the children's welfare at Harbour of Hope and referencing Ms. Martel's incarceration as grounds for potential state intervention. The intermediary specifically mentioned ensuring the children receive care in a structured environment free from destabilizing influences, meaning Genevieve is trying to have them taken away from Margaret. Finch Harrison stated, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "That is the logical conclusion," Sir Davies replied. "She appears to be fabricating a narrative, suggesting Ms. Martel is both unstable and planning some form of financial claim upon release, leveraging that to argue for state custody of the children." The calculated cruelty, the sheer scope of Genevieve's decade-long campaign was staggering. This wasn't just about the past, it was an active assault on his children's present. The visiting room at Rikers Island felt like a purgatory designed by bureaucrats. Cold linoleum, harsh fluorescent lighting, the clanging echo of steel doors. Harrison sat opposite Olivia, separated by thick, scratched plexiglass, the black telephone receiver cold against his ear. 10 years stripped away in an instant. She was thinner, the vibrant energy he remembered banked low beneath layers of exhaustion and prison pallor. Her green eyes, once sparkling with life, now held a profound weariness, but also an unbreakable core of strength and shock. Shock at seeing him there. "Harrison," she finally said into the receiver, her voice huskier, rougher. After 10 years of silence, what possible reason could bring the great Harrison Blackwood here? The bitterness was understandable earned. "I saw them, Olivia." He said the words, feeling inadequate. The girls. Clara Flora. Alice Meyer. Selling flowers on Fifth Avenue. Her composure flickered. A hand flew instinctively to her chest. "And I know everything," he said quietly, rushing the words out. The diagnosis. Genevieve manipulated Dr. Cole. The letters. She intercepted every single one. Your sentencing. She influenced Thorne. Olivia stared at him, absorbing his words. He saw not surprise, but a grim, painful vindication wash over her face. "I always suspected Genevieve," she whispered. "She despised me from the start. Saw me as inadequate for the Blackwood name." She closed her eyes briefly. "But I wrote to you, Harrison, for years. Begged you just to see them, just to know they existed. All returned. Or vanished. I never got them, Olivia. Not one." He leaned closer to the glass, needing her to believe this one crucial truth. "I was arrogant, proud, blinded by my own issues and her lies. I failed you. I failed them, completely and unforgivably." Tears finally welled in Olivia's eyes, not of self-pity, but of decade-old grief. "Do you have any idea," she choked out, "giving birth alone, raising 4 babies on nothing, watching them ask questions about their father. I couldn't answer honestly without destroying them. Patching clothes, skipping meals, the constant fear, and then prison for trying to feed them. Each word was a physical blow. No, he admitted, his own voice thick. I can't imagine. But I see the results. I see their strength, their bond. They are incredible, Olivia. You raised incredible daughters. We survived, she corrected, wiping furiously at her tears. We didn't live. We survived. Then a flash of dark, wry humor touched her lips. Though I suppose I should thank Genevieve. She never did anything by halves, especially when it came to making my life interesting. The guard announced 5 minutes remaining. My lawyer is working on your release, Harrison said quickly. We have evidence against Genevieve against Thorne's bias. Be careful, Harrison, Olivia warned, her gaze suddenly sharp. Genevieve won't go down easily. She protects her world fiercely. Back in the sterile luxury of his penthouse, the confrontation was inevitable. Genevieve arrived radiating cool elegance, oblivious to the storm about to break. Harrison, darling, she began, pouring herself a drink. I trust your little sabbatical is over. The Nakamura deal needs your attention. He didn't waste time. He laid out the evidence. Cole's confession, Davies's report on the mail, the judge, the current plot with CPS. Genevieve's mask didn't just crack, it shattered, her face contorted with fury. Everything I did was for you, for this family. To protect the Blackwood legacy from that woman and her brood. They were a complication, a threat to everything our parents built. They are my daughters. Genevieve Harrison roared, the sound echoing in the vast room. My blood. And you condemned them and their mother to a decade of hell. They should never have existed. She shrieked, her composure gone. You were meant to be free of that entanglement. He saw her then, truly saw her, consumed by a twisted obsession with control devoid of empathy. It's over, Genevieve, he said, his voice deadly calm. Your access, your influence, everything. It ends now. Just as Genevieve opened her mouth to retaliate, Harrison's phone buzzed urgently. It was Catherine Sterling. Mr. Blackwood, her voice was clipped urgent. We have confirmation. Genevieve's lawyers, using the fabricated evidence from her investigator, filed an emergency petition with CPS this afternoon, citing immediate risk. They're requesting temporary state custody of the children, pending a hearing scheduled for Fanciko tomorrow morning. They're trying to move them before Olivia can be released. The floor dropped out from beneath Harrison. Genevieve wasn't just scheming. She was acting. Now. His daughters were in immediate danger of being swallowed by the system his sister was manipulating. The time for strategy was over. This was a rescue mission. The news of Genevieve Dubois' petition hit Harrison like a physical blow, the calculated cruelty of it stealing his breath. But the shock quickly solidified into ice-cold resolve. There was no more time for quiet maneuvering. He moved with the brutal efficiency he usually reserved for hostile takeovers. Within hours, Catherine Sterling, armed with Davies' meticulously compiled evidence and Harrison's full authority, executed a multi-pronged strike. An emergency injunction was filed against the CPS petition, highlighting Genevieve's malicious intent and fabricated evidence. Simultaneously, the damning proof of Genevieve's interference with Judge Thorne, her manipulation of Dr. Cole, and her systematic interception of Olivia's mail was presented discreetly but firmly to key members of the Blackwood Enterprises board and the relevant legal authorities. Genevieve's downfall was as swift as it was devastating. The news broke not through whispers, but through carefully orchestrated leaks to select financial journals and gossip columns known for their merciless reach. Harrison ensured the narrative was controlled. The respected philanthropist's sister, revealed as a manipulative fraud, interfering with justice, betraying her own family. There was a certain grim irony watching her carefully constructed world of influence and social standing evaporate almost overnight. She was stripped of her board seat, her access frozen, her name becoming synonymous with scandal. The calls stopped. The invitations vanished. The empire she sought to control had turned on her, leaving her isolated in the opulent cage she had built. There were no tearful pleas. Harrison allowed no direct contact, just the cold, clean severance she deserved. While Genevieve's world imploded, another world opened. Under the bright, indifferent sky outside Rikers Island, Olivia Martell took hesitant steps back into freedom. The drab prison uniform was gone, replaced by simple clothes Catherine Sterling had arranged. Olivia blinked against the sunlight, looking smaller, more fragile than Harrison remembered, yet radiating an incandescent resilience. Then 4 small figures burst through the waiting area, 4 identical blurs of mismatched coats and flying hair. "Mum!" Their cries echoed across the concrete yard. Olivia sank to her knees as Clara, Flora, Alice, and Maya engulfed her in a tangle of limbs and joyous, tearful shouts. She buried her face in their hair, inhaling their scent, murmuring their names, her hands tracing their faces as if confirming they were real. It was a reunion, raw and profound, a reclaiming of stolen time, a fierce affirmation of love against all odds. Harrison watched from a distance, his throat tight, allowing them this sacred moment, acutely aware that his presence was both necessary and an intrusion. Later that day, the tension in the small, clean apartment Harrison had secured for them was thick enough to touch. Toys he'd hastily purchased sat in bright, optimistic piles, ignored. The girls clung close to Olivia on the second-hand sofa, their earlier euphoria replaced by wary silence as Harrison sat opposite them. Olivia met his gaze, a silent nod passing between them. It was time. He cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud. "Girls," he began, his voice unsteady despite his resolve. "There's something important I need to tell you. I haven't been completely honest about who I am." 4 pairs of identical blue eyes fixed on him. Clara's analytical gaze sharpened. Flora's hand stilled in her lap. Alice's arms crossed defensively. Maya's lower lip trembled slightly. My full name, Harrison, took a deep breath. The air feeling thin is Harrison Blackwood. He saw a flicker of recognition. The name on buildings, perhaps the name whispered in connection to their mother's past. He pushed on before his courage failed. "And I am your father." Silence. Utter deafening silence that stretched for an eternity. Clara broke it first, her voice quiet, but cutting. The one Mom wrote letters to, the one who didn't believe her. Yes, Harrison admitted, shame washing over him. "I made a terrible mistake. I believed lies, Clara. And I was wrong." Alice exploded. "No!" she cried, scrambling off the sofa, tears streaming down her face. "You're not our father. Our father wouldn't leave us. He wouldn't let Mum go to that place. You're just a rich man feeling sorry for himself." She ran towards the small bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Flora flinched at the outburst, withdrawing into herself, silent tears now tracking paths down her pale cheeks as she stared fixedly at her own worn shoes. Maya looked utterly lost, glancing frantically between Harris and Olivia and the slammed door, whispering, "But Mum always said our dad was just very far away, working hard." Olivia reached out, pulling Maya close, murmuring soothing words, while her own eyes glistened with unshed tears. Harrison sat there, absorbing the raw force of their pain, their anger, their confusion. He didn't offer excuses. He simply sat with it, letting their grief wash over him. When Clara spoke again, her voice was level, almost eerily calm. "Why now? Why after 10 years do you suddenly care?" "Because I saw you," Harrison answered honestly, meeting her gaze. "And seeing you, it changed everything. It was like finding a part of myself I never knew was missing. I know I don't deserve it, but I would like the chance to be your father. If you'll let me." The weeks that followed were a crucible. Harrison threw himself into the slow, painstaking work of earning trust, a process far more complex than any corporate negotiation. He showed up consistently, respecting their boundaries, bringing groceries, helping with homework, quietly fixing things around the apartment. Alice remained volcanically resistant, refusing to speak to him directly for days, sometimes leaving the room pointedly when he entered. Harrison didn't push. He simply acknowledged her presence, continued speaking to her gently, even without a response, and respected her need for distance. Clara tested him constantly, her sharp questions probing his sincerity, her observations sometimes comically critical. "Dad," she announced one evening, holding up a slightly burnt grilled cheese sandwich he'd made. "On a scale of 1 to 10, your culinary effort receives a 4. Edible, but lacking finesse." Harrison, humbled, merely nodded. "Noted. I'll aim for a 5 next time." Flora remained quiet, observing him with watchful eyes. Progress with her was measured in shared moments of silence. They offered drawing a brief, hesitant smile when he correctly identified a flower she pointed out in the park. He fumbled often. He tried organizing a fun family outing to a museum that dissolved into chaos when Maya got lost for 5 terrifying minutes. He attempted to explain complex business concepts when asked about his work, only to be met with blank stares or Clara's polite interruption. "Perhaps you could explain the part about the synergistic leveraging after we finish our math homework." Through it all, Olivia watched. She maintained a careful distance emotionally, but there was a growing ease in their interactions. They coordinated schedules, discussed the girls' needs, sometimes sharing a brief, wry smile over a particularly absurd parenting moment. One evening, after Harrison had patiently spent an hour helping Alice untangle a hopelessly knotted necklace, Olivia found him staring out the window, looking exhausted but content. "They're hard work," she said quietly, coming to stand beside him. "They're worth it," he replied without hesitation. She didn't respond immediately, just watched the city lights flicker below. "You've changed, Harrison." It wasn't an accusation, nor was it forgiveness. Just an observation. The breakthrough, when it came, was small, but significant. Harrison had noticed Alice's quiet affection for a scruffy stray cat that frequented the small park near their apartment building. She'd leave scraps of food for it when she thought no one was looking. Understanding her protective nature, Harrison didn't try to catch the cat or bring it home. Instead, one weekend he spent an afternoon building a small insulated cat shelter from scrap wood, placing it discreetly under a bush, leaving food and water nearby daily. He never mentioned it. But a few days later, while walking past the park, he saw it, a single perfect daisy, undoubtedly arranged by Flora, tucked carefully beside the food bowl inside the little shelter. Later that evening, as Harrison read a bedtime story, badly stumbling over voices, Alice didn't edge away quite so far on the sofa, and when he finished, she mumbled a barely audible "night." Olivia, who had been watching from the doorway, met Harrison's surprised gaze. A soft, genuine warmth lit her eyes, directed solely at him. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. A fragile tendril of hope in the wreckage of the past. 1 year later, the phrase itself felt like a quiet miracle. Spring had returned to New York, painting Central Park in hopeful splashes of green and yellow, much like it had painted over the stark landscape of their lives. The chaotic energy radiating from the picnic blanket near the carousel was pure, unadulterated joy. Clara, Flora, Alice, and Maya, 10 years old today, were a whirlwind of matching sundresses and flying pigtails, leading a game of tag with new school friends. Their laughter, loud and carefree, was the sweetest sound Harrison Blackwood had ever known. He watched them leaning comfortably against a sturdy oak, no longer the stiff CEO, but simply Dad, clad in jeans and a soft, worn shirt. Beside him, Olivia surveyed the happy scene, a serene smile gracing her lips. Her floral design business, Bloom and Haven, had blossomed her artistic touch, gracing Park Avenue apartments and society weddings, a testament to her rediscovered passion and independence. "They look happy," Olivia observed, her voice soft. "They are?" Harrison replied, his gaze meeting hers. A comfortable silence settled between them, built not on unspoken tensions, but on shared understanding. "We all are, aren't we?" The past year had been one of rebuilding brick by patient brick. Harrison had fundamentally restructured Blackwood Enterprises, shocking the financial world by diverting a significant portion of its profits into the newly established Harbor of Hope Foundation. Headed by a revitalized and deeply respected Margaret Finch, the foundation was expanding its reach, providing transitional housing and support services for single parents across the city. Harrison found more satisfaction reviewing blueprints for family shelters than he ever had reviewing stock portfolios. His legacy was no longer just about the Blackwood name. It was about the lives touched, the second chances offered. Genevieve's name rarely surfaced. Her conviction for fraud and judicial interference had resulted in a substantial prison sentence and complete social ostracization. A final desperate letter sent from prison had arrived months ago. Harrison hadn't opened it. Some doors needed to remain permanently closed. The most profound reconstruction, however, had happened quietly between Harrison and Olivia. It wasn't a fiery rekindling of their youthful passion, but something deeper, stronger, a love reborn from the ashes of shared pain and earned forgiveness. It grew in the late-night talks after the girls were asleep, in the shared glances across a chaotic breakfast table, in the way they learned to navigate parenting 4 distinct personalities together. Harrison still fumbled sometimes, like the infamous International Cuisine Night, where his attempt at paella resulted in something vaguely resembling burnt rice pudding. Olivia had surveyed the smoke-filled kitchen, raised an eyebrow and quipped, "Well, Harrison, points for ambition. Perhaps we stick to takeout for international relations." They had laughed, then genuinely laughed, the sound bridging the last remnants of the chasm between them. He learned the intricate language of his daughters, Clara's need for logic and order, Flora's requirement for quiet space to process Alice's fierce loyalty hidden beneath a prickly exterior, Maya's boundless optimism and occasional dramatic flair. He learned to listen, really listen, not just wait for his turn to speak. He learned that true strength often lay in admitting vulnerability. That evening, after the birthday guests had departed and the girls were finally asleep, exhausted and happy, Harrison found Olivia on the apartment balcony, gazing at the glittering Manhattan skyline, the same skyline he had once stared at in lonely splendor. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms gently around her waist. She leaned back against him, naturally comfortably. "It was a good day," she murmured. "It was a perfect day," he corrected softly. He hesitated, his heart pounding with a nervousness no boardroom battle had ever induced. "Olivia," she turned in his arms, looking up at him, her green eyes clear and full of a warmth he once thought lost forever. 10 years ago, he began, his voice thick with emotion. "I made the biggest mistake of my life. Fueled by fear, pride, and lies, I threw away the only things that ever truly mattered. He swallowed, meeting her gaze directly. I know I can never erase the pain I caused. But this past year, learning to be a father to our incredible daughters, learning to be worthy of your friendship, your trust, it's been the most meaningful work I've ever done. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. It wasn't a flashy diamond like the first time. This was simpler, a delicate band with 4 small, intertwined sapphires, the color of their daughter's eyes. I know we're doing well like this. He continued, his voice trembling slightly. We're a team. But I want more, Olivia. I want us. Properly. Forever. Built on truth this time, on respect, on the love that somehow survived everything. Will you marry me again? Tears welled in Olivia's eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. Oh, Harrison, she whispered, her hand reaching up to cup his cheek. Yes, I will. Their wedding, held a few months later, wasn't a grand society affair, but an intimate gathering in the garden of a small historic inn outside the city. Margaret Finch beamed from the front row. Catherine Sterling raised a toast to second chances. Davies stood quietly in the background, a rare smile touching his lips. The true stars, however, were the flower girls, Clara, Flora, Alice, and Maya, dressed in shades of sapphire blue. After the ceremony, they stood before their parents holding hands and presented a performance they'd secretly prepared. It was a slightly off-key, utterly charming song about grumpy dads who learn to smile, strong mums who fight dragons and bad judges, and 4 sisters who finally got their complete family. They finished with a flourish and 4 identical, beaming smiles, launching themselves at Harrison and Olivia for a group hug. Later, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn, Harrison held Olivia close, watching their daughters chase fireflies. The scars of the past remained visible only to them, but they no longer ached. They were reminders of a journey undertaken, a battle fought, and a peace hard won. Thank you, Harrison whispered against her hair, his voice filled with gratitude. For giving me this. For giving us this. Olivia squeezed his hand, her eyes reflecting the twilight. And thank you, Harrison, she replied softly, for finally coming home. They stood together, watching their 4 miracles dance in the fading light, their future stretching before them, bright with the promise of ordinary days, extraordinary love, and the enduring, resilient strength of a family rebuilt finally whole. The emptiness was gone, replaced by a quiet, profound joy, the earned peace he never thought he'd find. And so, from the ashes of a decade lost to lies and regret, a family finds its way back. Not erasing the scars, but discovering a profound strength in the healing. Harrison and Olivia's journey reminds us that sometimes the deepest connections are forged not in perfection, but in the messy, difficult, and ultimately rewarding work of mending what was broken. How often in life do we get a true second chance, not just to fix a mistake, but to rebuild ourselves from the ground up? Perhaps the greatest legacies aren't etched in corporate towers or stock portfolios, but are quietly built in moments of vulnerability, acts of unwavering commitment, and the resilient, enduring power of love finding its way home. This story truly resonated with us, exploring the long shadows our past choices can cast and the stubborn hope that keeps us reaching for a brighter future. We wonder how it touched you. What part of Harrison's transformation or Olivia's quiet strength stood out most to you on their path to forgiveness and rebuilding? Do you believe even the deepest wounds can heal with enough time, effort, and sincerity? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We genuinely love reading your perspectives and insights. And as always, your feedback is what helps us grow and tell better stories. If you have any ideas on how we can make our future narratives even more compelling, or if there was anything in today's story or its telling that you think we could improve, please don't hesitate to let us know. Your constructive thoughts are truly invaluable to us. If this story of second chances and family rediscovered touched your heart, please show your support with a like. It makes a real difference and helps others find the story too. And feel free to share it with anyone you think might find a little bit of strength or hope within its message. To join us for more journeys that explore the complexities of the human heart, please subscribe and click that notification bell so you won't miss what's next. Thank you so much for watching and sharing this time with us. Until next time, take care.